So if you play on a pitch like this, with all the little black rubber bits in it, you shouldn't use your normal FG boots, because not only do you lose your warranty, but you also have a much higher risk of getting injured really badly in your joints and your knees. Instead, you should use these so-called AG boots for artificial grass. And in today's video, I'll give you my top 5 best AG boots in 2024. So protect your knees and join me. And we can start out with a boot that might be a bit overlooked by some people, the new Balance Tequila 4 Plus Pro. They also make a Furon, but I kind of prefer the Tequilas here, even though they only make it in the laceless model. But anyways, what you get here is a pretty decent AG outsole that has these slightly larger hollowed out conical studs that offer a decent amount of traction, a little bit resembling the FG option, but then also it feels a little bit, actually, a lot less aggressive than the FG option does. And when you play on artificial grass, that's a really good thing. Now, it's also a little bit wider than the FG model, and when you combine that with that stupidly soft hypo-knit upper on the Tequilas, it feels very effortlessly comfortable. And actually also on the safer side with the way that the studs move in the artificial grass when you twist and turn. And for me, it's a really good example of a very strong, middle of the road execution where you have a good feeling in terms of safety, but where there's also enough traction in the ground. I'll be honest though, I'm a little bit annoyed that they didn't make an AG version of the low-cut 4 Plus Pro with the laces. And I mean, they do make the Furons, but again, I just think I prefer the feel of the Tequilas. So, overlooked, but solid. And in 4th place, we have the Adidas Predator Elite variations. And I say variations plural because there are actually 2 of them. One for modern 4G artificial pitches, and then one for 2G 3D pitches that are slightly older, a little bit shorter, and also harder, a little bit rougher to the feel than modern 4G pitches. And with the 4G option, you get an outsole that a bit more resembles that on the FG outsole, which is a good thing in terms of traction, that is on the aggressive side. But then on the other hand, it might also be a little bit harsher because the studs are quite long and there aren't that many of them, only 13, than I would ideally have liked when you twist and turn. But then, hey, the 2G, 3G option solves that, right? The studs are shorter and there's a gazillion of them. And well, yeah, you're right, on paper at least. And also in the sense that you do definitely feel there's a more balanced sensation of grip. They feel safer because there's a more even weight distribution on each stud on this one rather than the 4G option. But the thing is that if I could take the studs themselves and place it on the 4G option, I think that would by far have been the best solution out of everything we have. But because the plate itself is just massive, it weighs a ton, and it also feels a lot wider, making the boots feel really chunky in the way they fit. I'm not sold, if I'm honest. Honestly, the 2G, 3G option doesn't really feel anything like the fit you get in the 4G option. That's very streamlined and for me, borderline perfect. But these are just too chunky and heavy for me. And I mean, if you really want a Predator, you want the hyper touch and the feeling of strike skin, but you're also very concerned with safety and durability, sure, these could be an option. But I just constantly find myself drifting back to this, despite the fact that I think the studs are maybe a tad long and there could have been more. So a very solid option, the boots are great because of the upper, but Adidas, there is room for improvement. But Adidas also have a problem. These 3, because if you're really looking for something FG-like that is also safer to use on an artificial pitch, I think you should really take a look at Nike's AG Pro options, particularly the Nike Champo Legend 10, but the Phantom GX2s are also very, very solid. And that's not saying that the Mercurials are bad. They do a reasonably good job. The studs are conical, but they are also on the longer side. And this is where I think especially the Champo Legend 10s are very, very strong, because the studs here under the forefoot, which is where those rotational movements happen, they are shorter, meaning that they have a smaller risk of getting stuck in the ground, leading to you, basically, if the boot is stuck and your knee continues, the risk of snapping something is a little bit higher. So that's a very, very good thing. Now, the Phantom GXs are also pretty close, but the legends are just ever so slightly shorter, so I definitely prefer that. And also, the durability in these, all three basically, feels very good because the studs are hollowed out. And that means that when you play on an artificial or synthetic surface, the heat from the abrasion is basically countered a bit by having hollowed out studs that cool a bit quicker. So that abrasion, the heat, is a little less hard on the studs, leading to them being more durable. And I also really like the fact that you get the feeling of an FG boot with conical studs, but where it also feels as if it's been engineered to take a little bit care of you and your knees. And I would definitely say that while I think the stud layout and the length is the best on the Legend 10, I do feel that as a package, I just like the Phantom GX2s a little bit more, and they're definitely also very, very strong. And I usually say that the Nike AG Pro boots are the best AG boots for people who don't want AG boots. And another cool thing is that you can also use them as slightly less aggressive options for playing on FG pitches. So, solid. And if you can only buy one boot and you play on both FG and artificial pitches, these are a very, very good option. But if you want to go a bit more AG specific, you want a lot of studs that are also a little bit shorter. And here, the top two they're really, really strong options. Now, you have Puma's MG Outo, which stands for multi-ground and doesn't have anything to do with artificial grass, which is a little bit weird, but that's what it is. You have 24 studs, and they're very strategically placed under the forefoot and the heel, which ensures that you get a much more even pressure distribution on each stud. And again, like I explained before with the Predator 2G, 3G, it ensures that there's less weight on each individual stud, leading to a smaller risk of the studs getting stuck in the ground and you snapping an ankle or knee or something of that jazz. That's not very nice, that's what you want to avoid. Now personally, I'm not a big fan of the Ultra Ultimate currently, so for me, the Future is where it's all about. And I actually wore the FG Future Ultimate just the other day before shooting this. And I really feel the difference from the FG to the MG outsole in how much less the MG outsole drags or pulls on my knees when I change direction sharply. And it's actually really significant when you play on an artificial grass pitch. You really feel that in the FG option, and I didn't really in these. And in that regard, they felt a lot safer, really. So keep that in mind if you have a Future and you play a lot on AG. Now, I will say that, hand on my heart, honestly, if I am to go and play football on an artificial grass pitch tonight, I'm probably gonna go and settle for the Phantom GX2s because I just like the upper and the feel of the boot a bit more than the Futures. But if we look purely at the outsole, this one for use on AG pitches has to be one of the best in terms of both performance and safety. But to me, the Mizuno Alpha Japan AG, or if you're not living in a bottomless pit of money, the Mizuno Alpha Elite AG is just a tad bit better. And sure, they might only have 21 studs compared to the 24 studs on the Future MG, but I really appreciate how there are more studs focused under the forefoot, which, as we know, is where the rotational movements really happen. And I also really like the feeling of how the studs have this gradual shift in height, meaning that under the very front of the boot here, you have very small studs, very low studs, meaning that when you do those very tiptoey rotational movements, it feels really balanced, very easy and smooth, and extremely safe. But then also on the back part of the forefoot, you have slightly longer studs, still feel safe, but where you get a slightly more responsive sensation as you push off. And I think for me, this is kind of like the perfect balance of what I'm looking for, with that responsive FG-like feeling, but without any of the drawbacks from the FG boots with the longer, fewer studs. And it's just, the perfect combination with, of course, safety being the key word here. And for me, all of that in combination with how I find these to be some of the best fitting boots and most well put together boots out there, the Alpha is just a bit of a no-brainer for me when I go and play on artificial grass. But if you can't or just won't pay the 320 euros that these cost, I mean, they're awesome, but it's also a little bit much. The Elite version will buy you 95% of the Japan awesomeness for just 200 euros. And if I'm honest, most players out there, except for maybe the most hardcore boot aficionados, won't really be able to tell that big of a difference. They're really good. And my go-to boots on AG. So there you have them, my friends. 5, actually plus, of the best boots to use on artificial pitches. And you can of course get all of them on the list in the link to Unisport right over there. But before you go and do that, tell me, and be honest here, do you use AG-specific boots when you play on artificial grass, and which model would you go for? Let me know in the comment section right down below, and then of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel with the notifications on already, go and do that. And then if you want more boot-specific stuff, there's a wicked playlist right down there. And with those words, I'll be signing off. Cheerio. Take care of those knees. Wear AG.